one of the trick that not a whole lot of people know is that if you take a rock that was in the fire all night long and you put them in your biggest pot and you leave that in your vestibule, we just made it to camp. We're here tonight on Crown Land for just a simple overnight, and I'm here with my friend Ron. You guys might know him as the Swifty Paddler on Instagram. Check him out, he's a really good photographer. We are well into fall right now. We're on Crown Land. We're just spending a quick overnight here. And every time I tell people that I still camp in those cold conditions when late October comes around, early November, the first question they always ask me is, how do you not get cold at night? So today I'm gonna share with you guys not one but 9 tips that I do to make sure that I'm warm when I sleep out in the backcountry in cold conditions. The first tip I'd like to share with you is, first off, picking the right shelter for your adventure is going to be crucial to making sure you have a warm sleep at night. It is significantly warmer inside the tent than outside the tent, so if you're just starting out in cold weather, going sleeping under a tarp is going to be more challenging to stay warm. Some of the tents, the 4-season tents, because of the construction of the material that they're using, because there's going to be less mesh in it as well, depending on the situation, will be actually significantly warmer. The other thing too is wherever you're going to pitch your shelter, whether it's your tarp, whether it's your tent, making sure that you're in a protected area from the wind will be a really first good step to sleeping warm in cold weather. Tip number 2 has to do with your sleep system, and I'll get into the details of this when I get in the tent later when I go to bed. But what's important to do, especially if you use a down bag, sleeping bag or quilt, is make sure that you set it up and open it up as soon as you get to camp to give the opportunity to that down to loft up, because if you just leave it packed into your bag and you just unpack it right before going to bed, that down will not have had enough time to loft, and it's going to be a much colder bag than if it had the time to basically loft up and get nice and cozy for you. Tip number 3, the nights come really fast in the colder months of the year. Make sure to stay active once you get to camp so that you don't get cold, but so much more important, although you want to stay active, you don't want to get sweaty. You might feel really warm during the daytime when the sun is out, but as soon as the sun sets, it gets cold really fast and you don't want to be wet or sweaty at all. So for tonight here, what I'm prepping right now is all of our firewood to make sure that we're ready to have a nice warm fire all night long so we can cook. We got lucky here on this site. We already had some nice firewood already mostly processed, so I'm just making some smaller firewood to get me started. Make sure that all of your camp duties are taken care of so that you don't have to worry about that in the dark. And remember that the sun sets much earlier in those colder months of the year. Well, that took a couple of tries, but we finally got the fire going. The wood that was already chopped was pretty wet, so I had to try a few times. One thing that's important to keep in mind as well with all of these tips that I'm sharing with you guys today, it will require a little bit of trial and error. If you do all of these back to back to back, and especially some of the more specific tips I'm going to share with you guys later, you might actually overheat and be too warm. So depending on how cold it is, you might want to compound some of these tips a bit more than others. But the idea is that now you'll have all of the tips that I know so that you can go out and try them out and figure out your own combination of what's going to work best for you. So now that I know that I'm done for the evening in terms of moving around before I start getting cold and before the sun sets, I highly recommend that you change into your evening clothes to make sure that you keep that body warmth and that you don't let yourself get cold, because the hardest thing to do is once you get cold is to warm up again. So it's maintaining that body temperature that allows you to be comfortable. All right, so it turns out the wood that we had here is completely wet. It looked dry. I was not over my camp duties. I took a layer off. We're gonna canoe across to another island. There's some dead trees that we can spot from here, so we're gonna go collect wood, but I'm gonna try to do this in a really smart way so that I don't sweat too much. I don't want to be wet when the temperature drops, so let's get some wood. Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, now we got all of our firewood. I did say not to sweat. That didn't happen. So, that's okay. If that happens to you, it's not the end of the world. Your body heat will dry you out, but you do have to be conscious of that so that you don't get cold. The key is not to get cold. The sun is just under the trees now. So we're gonna slowly paddle back and just allow for my own body heat to dry out my sweat. And it works actually pretty well. It's just a matter of kind of playing that game as to how cold you get to when you need to start wearing other layers so that you don't over sweat. Because right now, if I was to put more layers, I would just keep sweating. So I need to let my body temperature go down as I'm drying off. And as I'm getting colder, I'm gonna start layering up when we're at camp. All right, so we're finally done step number 4. We have all the wood that we need for tonight. And I'm not completely dry yet, to be honest, but I am starting to get a bit of a chill. So that's about when you're gonna wanna start layering up, even though you might be a little wet from your sweat, because it is your body heat that will essentially dry all of that for you. We can finally move on to tip number 5. And tip number 5 is all about eating a big, large, hearty meal before you go to bed on those cold nights. Eating a lot of food just really gets all of your digestive system going, and all that digestion really creates a lot of heat and keeps you nice and warm. So for tonight, for us, you know, we're gonna go with a classic roasted vegetables in foil. We're gonna have a nice little steak. We're gonna have a nice little beer with all this, and just really eat up all those calories so that tonight I'm nice and toasty because my body's working through all of that food. I guess I brought the kids' utensils.
Oh, it's the onions that I smelled. That's what it is.
That's, oh, yes. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh, my goodness.
Cheers, brother.
The Brussels sprouts were good, but adding the onions is like that's a pro tip, I think. That's good.
Okay, this is good, but it's way too hot.
Eat a lot of food to warm you up. Look at that. Look at that here. I think that bite was all fat. For tip number 6, and by far my favorite tip to keep you nice and toasty in the coldest of nights, is the Hot Nalgene water bottle technique. And all it is basically is I boiled water earlier and I put it inside this Nalgene bottle. I made sure the cap was nice and shut properly so there's nothing that's gonna leak. Is you can throw that bottle in the foot box of your sleeping bag 15-20 minutes before you go to bed, and it'll really warm up your sleeping bag so that when you basically slip into your sleeping bag, it's really nice and warm, and it'll keep you warm for a large portion of the night as well. To be honest though, tonight it's nowhere near cold enough for me to use this technique for me personally. So all it is I've basically made water. I'm gonna leave it in the vestibule for me. The Nalgene water bottle trick is by far my favorite way to keep me nice and warm when I go out on my camping trips in the coldest nights. For tip number 7, it's an obvious one, but make sure to go pee before you crawl into your sleeping bag. And more importantly, if ever you have to pee at any time in the night, make sure to, bite the bullet, step out, go pee. The more amount of water that your body has inside that's trying to keep you warm, the harder it's going to be for you to stay warm. Make sure to relieve yourself because you will be significantly colder otherwise. Tip number 8 for you. If you didn't manage to get warm enough before getting into bed, make sure to move around a little bit just to warm up your body, but don't sweat. Sweating is not acceptable, but if you just have that chill that you just can't kind of shake, moving around, doing a couple of jumping jacks, a couple of push-ups will really help your body to warm up before you get into tent, because the worst is to try to warm up once you get into your sleeping bag. You want to try to get to your sleeping bag in a state where you feel warm. One of the trick that not a whole lot of people know is that if you take a rock that was in the fire all night long and you put them in your biggest pot and you leave that in your vestibule, it will significantly warm up the tent, especially in the first hour or two that you're going to be in there. It's going to really take the bite away from the coldness and allow you to get nice and cozy and warm in there. Now, of course, a hot rock like that, you have to make sure that you don't touch your tent with it, or you don't touch it at all so you don't burn yourself. For tip number 9 for you, and don't worry, before I close this video, I will jump into tip number 2, which was having a proper sleep system. Like I promised you earlier, I'll go over that in a second. But the final tip I want to talk to you guys about is making sure that you sleep with a toque on. You can lose up to like 80% of your body heat through your head, and wearing a toque is crucial and such a simple thing that you can do so that you can sleep nice and warm in the backcountry on really cold nights. So that's going to be my toque for tonight. And of course, your sleeping system is going to be so crucial to make sure that you can have a really good night's sleep. If you don't have the right sleep system, you're gonna have a miserable sleep. For me, it's calling between probably 5 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius at night. I'm sleeping with a -7 down sleeping bag from a Solo. Whole bag I've had for a while, but it works really well for the temperature rating that we're in. And more importantly, it's paired up with a really good sleeping pad. And this is super underrated for most people that are just starting out, or even people that have been going out for a long time. Purchasing a really expensive pad is not something that a lot of people do. This is where you can really preserve a lot of your heat, and the ground will be trying to suck all that heat out of you, and having a good sleeping pad underneath you will do that. My favorite sleeping pad for cold weather is, of course, the Thermarest Neo Air X Therm. If you would like to find out more about that pad, I'll leave a link right up here. And otherwise, I will see you, as always, in the next video. Peace.